You're listening to episode 13 of the Creative Will podcast. In this episode, I'm interviewing my attorney, Paige Hulse of Paige Hulse Law, and she is sharing with us the 5 contracts you need in your creative business right now. Now, you'll notice this episode is a little bit longer than most, and that is because I think this is some of the most important information you need to be understanding as soon as possible. We break down and really simplify what contracts you need, what need to be in them. She has a template shop, shopcreativelaw.com. You can use my discount code KDO Selvidge 10 to get 10% off. But more than that, I just really want you guys to be educated on what you need legally for your business to be sustainable. This is something that we often forget. We think all about creativity, we all think about money, we think about marketing, but then we get into a bind and we realize we should have put the legalities of our business at the forefront of our business. So I hope you pay attention. I hope you take notes. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me or Paige and we will get back with you shortly. But sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. It is a good one. You're listening to the Creative Well podcast, the talk show where we believe in creating a life more beautiful than your brand. Hi, I'm Katie Selvidge, an award-winning publisher and creative entrepreneur. I will help you edit and refine your creative business dreams so that you can pursue your big goals in a holistic and sustainable way. Listen to my expert co-hosts as they share their secrets to being a discerning business owner and intentional creative. And the best part? You get to be in on the honest and life-changing conversations by calling into the show with your questions. Are you ready to simplify your business so it serves your life, not the other way around? Do you want to create beautiful, meaningful work that you're proud of, turning your passion into profits? Are you tired of spinning your wheels doing all the things and maybe just need a little business therapy? If this sounds like you, then you are in the right place. I'm so excited to welcome you to the show. It's not about doing more and it's not about doing less. It's about doing well. So I have Paige Hulse here with me of Paige Hulse Law and also the Shop Creative Law, which is having a huge sale this month starting May 1st. Before we dive into what you need as regard, being a creative and contracts and legal stuff, oh my. Let's start by introducing Paige. Paige, thanks so much for chatting with me today. For those who may be unfamiliar with what you do for creatives and with your legal work, can you fill us in a bit on who you are, how you got into this world, and what you have to offer?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about this. Like you said, my name is Paige Hulse, and I am an attorney. I have a couple of businesses. I have my law firm, which is Paige Hulse Law, and then I serve creatives through my second business, which is the Creative Law Shop. And the Creative Law Shop now is, I've been doing this for about 3 years now. And the shop began just as a way for me to help the growing demand of creatives who needed contracts, who knew that, when you start a business, you need to have some legalities in order, but you don't have the funds or the money to go meet with a lawyer and work with them one-on-one to create a custom contract, much less go meet with some lawyer in some high-rise building downtown who really doesn't know what a calligrapher actually is and therefore doesn't really know what to put in a contract. So anyways, the shop began just because people were asking for templates. People saw some of my contracts and were looking for more of them. So anyways.
So full disclosure, Paige started as a coaching client of mine. And then I became a client of hers because I realized a lot of things were not set up properly for Cottage Hill, and she really helped. And, I don't know about you guys, but starting a business is scary in general. Starting a creative business feels even more risky because there's few people
few people who really understand you, especially people who need to have the education expertise to make sure you're doing things correctly, where you don't get in trouble with the government or you don't lose a bunch of money. So that's why today's episode to me is so important, to really get, whether you've been in business a few months, a few years, longer, you just want to start out, just giving you a clear-cut path of what you actually need to get going. And I think her shop really answers the problem a lot of us have of, we don't want to, some random, I'm not going to name any business names, but some random person on the internet, or like she said, someone who is local but doesn't really get what you do. So Paige, let's just assume that someone listening wants to start a creative business, or they've been in business but they don't have an actual legal setup. When do you need to think about that? How do you do this?
A great question to start with, and I'm actually going to back up just a little bit because this is a question that I had to ask myself back in 2016 when I first got into the creative world in general, or I guess 2015 now that I think about it. As Katie knows, just because, like she said, I was one of her coaching clients to start out with, I was a full-time litigator, which meant that I was in court arguing with people all day. And I was specifically working in the energy industry, which meant that I was litigating contracts day in and day out. And so calligraphy became an outlet, a creative outlet that I would come home to every night to try to avoid some of the stress from the day. And as my calligraphy, I say grew, as my interest in calligraphy grew, people started asking for me to do some little pieces here and there. And then I got asked to do my first wedding, like all the place cards, all of the signage and everything for the wedding. And then I was faced, again, being a lawyer, I was faced with the question of how on earth do you actually literally start a creative business? What needs to happen? And it was through that process of starting an actual calligraphy business myself. And again, I say business kind of loosely because this was something I was doing at night on the weekends as more of a side hustle. But I had to answer that question for myself of what do you have to do to actually do it legally without getting in trouble? And that's when I realized there weren't that many resources out there for people who were asking the same question. So that's kind of a backstory on how I got here. The first thing that you need to do when you are starting a creative business is, if you want to do it legally, well, let me say this.
Let's all hope we do.
Yeah, and let me say this. Because I'm a lawyer, I can't give you a clear-cut answer. I'll give you two answers. What I would like for all of my clients to do when they are just starting out in business is you need to have an actual business. So you need to have an actual business formation.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So a lot of people, if you're just making goods, so we'll use my calligraphy as an example, just because that's most relevant for me. If you are just out there selling a few cards, selling a few prints, selling anything, your state or the government in general, but your state specifically views you as a business, and you might call yourself a solopreneur. That's kind of like a hot topic word in the industry, but what you really are is a sole proprietor, and that is a legal term, and that they have the exact same meaning. It just means you're doing your business on your own, but that, according to the state, that means you're doing business.
So I have a question because I have a lot of people ask me this, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. A lot of people happens
answer, Katie.
Quite a bit. You've taught me well, teacher. So a lot of people ask me, or I've heard the question be, don't I have to hit a certain number in profit or in income to be considered a business to therefore file as a business? What's the deal with that?
I can't speak across the country, and I will go ahead and actually use this as a great time to throw in my disclaimer that I need to throw in, which is this is all going to be just general education today. I'm not giving legal advice. Mm-hmm. I'm licensed in the state of Oklahoma. So I can only speak from the perspective of one state, and I'm not anybody's attorney who is listening to this podcast unless we sign an agreement.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if you need legal advice, find someone in your state.
Yes.
Paige is not your
That's correct.
lawyer.
Thank you for saying that, Katie. So yeah, it might vary across the board in different states, but generally speaking, no, that's a myth that people have made up.
Someone told me that.
Yeah, someone probably in a Facebook group told you that. Lots of people,
Probably.
lots of
Actually,
people
now that I think about it.
Lots of people like to share lots of legal knowledge in Facebook groups. Anyways, no, if you're making money, selling things, selling anything in commerce, you are viewed as a business by your state, and the state cares about that, and they're going to classify you as a business because they want taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they care, and that's why you need to care. So that being said, no, there's no monetary number that you have to hit.
So I'm gonna make it more difficult for you to answer.
Thank you.
So because I'll get a lot of people who want to work with me who have an idea for their business and they haven't really started and they're not 100% sure of what they're wanting to create is the thing that they want. You know, you may not be able to technically answer this or advise on this, but how does anyone navigate or decide at one point to file for business if they're not, let's say they get into calligraphy and they've sold a few prints and they've done a few things. They haven't really made much money, but they've started. And then they're like, oh, but I think I want to do graphic design more. At what point is it a profitable, like a money-making hobby and a business? Like, what would you tell someone who's in that place? Because I've had quite a few people
that's pretty
who
common.
are still, like, throwing spaghetti on the wall.
Yeah.
And there's money coming in, but it's not like they've, proclaimed or said.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. That's it. Actually, it's kind of funny. It's like you read my mind, and we did not set this up. But this is why when I started answering this question, I said there's kind of two answers to the question.
You're going to get there.
And so the first answer to the question would be, form an actual business, which we'll circle back to. My second answer to that question was going to be actually the first thing that you need to do is start with a client agreement. Because no matter what you're doing, and especially if you aren't sure what you want to do as a career path, you still have to have some legal protections in place. And the number one thing I want you to have, or the number one way that you can bring risk or liability onto yourself is by not having a contract with your client. So if you're like the example that you just said, and this happens, or I think just most recently, so it's most relevant in my mind. I've had a lot of people come to me who are kind of floating in the gray area between web design, graphic design, that's where I get a lot of the questions. Yeah. And so what I tell them always is to start at least with having a client agreement, so that you're protected, and we can get back to that a little bit too later on. But I would start with that, and then once you have done hopefully a few projects, and you kind of have an idea,
you're doing something.
Yeah, and hopefully, like, the more that you're doing your craft, the more clarity you have on what exactly you want to be doing as a career or what you want your business to be. Once you find that clarity, then you can go ahead and form the business. All that being said, it's not like graphic designers or calligraphers or, any other type of creative need different forms of businesses. The starting point's going to be the same for everybody, if that makes sense.
So this is, I think, where I know for myself with Cottage Hill, because, as you know, we're going through a lot of transition. I'm always confused as legally, like, what are we? So I think it's a great example of graphic designer, website designer. I think a design realm is a great example of someone who may not be as clear on what their business is or what it's becoming. When you talk about, I'm going to kind of make a big circle and come back to this, but when we're talking about creating a business, I'd love for you to explain, how do you actually file? And then we're going to talk about operating agreement, and that's when I get confused, because I'm like, well, what if 3 months down the road someone's like, I don't want to be a wedding planner, I want to be a birthday planner. I'm always hey, they're out there, hello. But you know what I mean, like, I always think about that because I get asked this a lot, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer.
No, that's a great question. And luckily, very easy answer.
Awesome.
So you always start, well, I'm not going to say always, because if you're somebody who is listening to this and you're going to start a multi-million-dollar company day one,
Please
the
let me know.
answer,
I'd love to get to know you.
yeah, I know. I'd like to be your friend, so call me. No, but the answer might be different for somebody in that type of realm. But if we're just talking about creatives today, the answer is simple, and it's the same across the board. You're going to want to start with an LLC.
Okay.
An LLC, I break it down into 3 steps. And this is just a simplified example, or a simplified way of explaining what an LLC consists of in the filing process, and even like when you need to bring an attorney on board. So the first step, no matter where you are, what state you're in, is you have to file your LLC with your state. So in the state of Oklahoma, you're always gonna do it with the Secretary of State's office. You can do it online. For us, what you do is you go online, Secretary of State's office again, and you literally hit file a new business entity.
You can literally Google this, guys.
Yeah.
I have 3 businesses. It's quite easy.
It's very, this is the part where I say, if we're talking about LLCs as being a 3-step process, I'll be blunt and say you don't need a lawyer until step 3. You don't need to pay somebody to do this part for you.
Hear that? You can save some money.
I know. So it's always good to be honest with people about that. So what you're going to do when you go file online is you're going to fill out a form that will be pretty simple, and it's going to ask things like your name, who you want your registered agent to be, which is a person who the state can contact if they have any questions for the business, the business name, that kind of stuff. The document that you're actually filling out online that seems so simple that you can fill out in probably 10 minutes or less is actually...
I think I filed for our ranch in 8 minutes.
Yeah, well, I do it in 4, so, whatever.
You've had more experience. But it's a quick process, guys.
So
it's not
easy.
that,
But it has a fancy name, and this is where people get intimidated, and it's and they get a little bit confused. What I was just talking about is called your Articles of Organization. So that sounds really fancy and formal, but that's all it is. It's a really, really easy process. Now, I will say, kind of going back a little bit, when you're talking about if somebody's not quite sure what type of creative business they want to have.
Because they ask, what is your business?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's going to be something.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Got an idea.
What I always do, just to play it safe, and what I even did when I started my calligraphy business, was Paige Hulse LLC. And you can, and if you keep it as your name, there's a lot of reasons I'm not going to get into on why that just keeps things simple. But you can always just use your name as your LLC's name, and you can file a DBA, doing business as, the creative so-and-so later on.
Yes, and that's how I've done my consulting. So it's KDO Selvidge, but that's not that's not necessarily how I run the business. It's editor's course and all the other things. So,
well, even the shop is Paige Hulse LLC, doing business as the Creative Law Shop.
Right.
So that's step 1 is your Articles of Organization. And the hardest part of that process, again, is just going to be figuring out what to name your business. And I always tell my clients to use their name, unless you actually have a specific business, you're filing. So step 2 is going to be, which step 2 and step 1 can kind of interchange, and step 2 I probably should have started with this one actually. It's going to be getting your EIN number. This is something that if my clients are doing things correctly, they know they're going to be filing an LLC no matter what. So that's why I have them file with the state first and then get their EIN number. The EIN number is filed with the IRS at irs.gov. It's free to do. And again, it's in a really easy form. This one might actually take you a couple more minutes. So maybe this one might take you a full 10 minutes to fill out. But this is your business's social security number, because again, the state and the federal government wants to know if a business exists and what they're doing. And there are just a lot of reasons down the road, obviously, why you're going to need an EIN number. Now, some people who kind of fight me on the issue of whether or not they need an LLC, and want to stay a sole proprietor, even though that doesn't afford them any protection, but we'll get to that. No, even if you're making a tiny amount of money with your business, you need to file for an EIN number, because most states, it's a law in most states that you have to have that number to do business in the state, because again, the state wants to know when they can collect taxes on you.
And even for those who, I feel like you might be listening to this episode because you feel like you need to or have to. I mean, if you're going to do any sort of business program or even benefits with different companies, that's what they're going to ask for to make you qualified.
Yeah.
I mean, even something as silly as like Wayfair.
Yeah.
I think that the only way you could do it was having your EIN number. So those of you who want to cut corners or aren't really listening very hard, you still need to get that.
I know it's not the most fun topic, but I promise it's important
what
we're talking about.
I can't tell you how good, just to pause for a second, can't tell you how confident I feel knowing I have this stuff and I save it in like a little Trello like workflow and I know exactly where it is. And it just, if you want to run a real business, and that's a whole other conversation, but if you want to run a real business, you've got to do the real steps to make it happen. So,
exactly.
Okay, so we file LLC, we get our EIN. What's step number 3
so
that we might need a lawyer for?
Yeah, so step number 3, and so step number 3 is where the lawyer comes in, and this is where you get an operating agreement.
And this is when I get confused.
Yes. So
you're like, I know.
This is where, and that's why I say this is where a lawyer needs to come in.
Yes.
Before I explain this part, can I back up just slightly?
Yeah.
And something gigantic that I overstepped or that I forgot to say is why do you want an LLC? And the whole purpose behind an LLC, and the reason why I want any of my clients, no matter what they're doing, to have an LLC, no matter what type of creative business owner you are, is because an LLC is a legal entity that creates separation between yourself and your business.
I just want to snap at that.
And so it creates that separation from both an asset standpoint and a liability standpoint. I'll get to the asset standpoint in a little bit. But from a liability standpoint, that means that your LLC owns its own liability. You personally own your own liability. So the most common analogy that people, or example that people hear, is if you get in trouble with your business and, heaven forbid, you end up in court and then you end up losing the judgment and the judge renders a judgment against you for $500,000 and you don't have that money in the bank account. If you don't have the LLC, you don't have that protection. And the judge could look at you and you could say, Judge, I don't have $500,000 in my bank account. And the judge can say, doesn't matter, you have a house and you have some cars, you can sell them and there's your equity. So that's why we want to have an LLC in place. We want to create as much separation at all times. If you take anything from this podcast interview, at all times, you want to create as much separation from yourself and liability as possible. Okay, so getting back to step number 3 of forming an LLC, that is obtaining an operating agreement. An operating agreement is the contract that governs your LLC. In some states, it has to be filed with the Secretary of State's office. In other states, like Oklahoma, it does not, but it's still required by most banks, and I require it of I won't work with a client that does not have an operating agreement for reasons I will get into. But the operating agreement is going to be, it can be very short or it can be long. I've written some that are, I can't remember how long my single member template is. I think it's like 8 pages long. I've written a 72-page operating agreement before.
So, question.
Yes.
You have an operating agreement in your shop, right?
I have 2 of them, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, someone who's like, girlfriend, I'm starting from scratch. I don't want to go find a lawyer.
Yeah.
And they can go into your shop, because I didn't do it this route. Paige she's my girl. She's my attorney, so she does my stuff. So for those who are, I totally get, I wish it was around when I started Cottage Hill. For those who are like, okay, if I can go a contract route, what is the difference between the 2 you offer?
Right.
And like, how does that guarantee doing things correctly and
Right.
Like how do
What is it?
what is it? And how do I know it's like I'm going to handle
Yes.
it in a legit manner?
Absolutely.
Because that would make me nervous.
Yeah. So I have two in the shop. One is just simply titled the single member operating agreement. And that is for if you are the only person in your LLC. I have a second one, which is titled the multi-member operating agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Got really creative with those names. And that is for, obviously, if you have more than one member of your LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Something I actually tell, and I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but this is what I drafted for you without you knowing it. It's something that I tell my clients is if you are forming a business that you know is pretty legit, you know it's going to grow in the future, which I know everybody thinks, but some people, like if you're starting an agency, for example, and you know that there's a chance later on down the road that you're going to have to bring on partners or things like that, or you may want to. I actually recommend that people purchase the multi-member operating agreement, and all you have to do is change the pronouns from we to I in the agreement.
Oh, that's smart.
And that operating agreement is actually, the multi-member operating agreement is literally the operating agreement that I wrote for my own companies, and then I turned my own operating agreement into a template.
Yeah.
So it's, when I say, so that it's literally what my companies both use.
Okay.
Both of my businesses have to protect my own business. Go ahead.
Okay, so two questions. The
Yes.
first one is, okay, when you purchase it, how do you make it your own?
Yeah. So this is really simple. An operating agreement sounds really scary and it's going to be long if you, especially.
I don't know why it intimidates me. Like when we
I don't know why it does.
Well,
either.
I don't know why when we first started talking about it, I was like, what am I going?
Well,
I feel like I have to reinvent the wheel.
When you talk about something gogoverning your business,
Yes.
that sounds intense.
Maybe
The
it's
good
just
news
me.
is you can, maybe,
Just
could be.
me.
The good news is no matter what, you can always amend your operating agreement if it's written correctly. But all this is going to do is specify who is in the business, what the business does. And all you have to do when you say that is cite like in Oklahoma, we just cite the Oklahoma statute that says doing business, for the legally, for
Yes.
all legal purposes under the state of Oklahoma. You don't even have to say if you're a calligrapher or what. It's going to state how much money you are requiring be kept in a bank account at all times. It might just talk about general things like that. That amount can be like $50. Those are the portions that are going to make your eyes glaze over.
Right.
Okay. That actually, I'll just be honest. The whole document's going to make your eyes glaze over. This document is so incredibly important, and I won't talk about too much legal verbiage today, but here's one that I am going to throw at you, and it's a term called piercing the corporate veil. So one of the main reasons why you want to have an operating agreement is because you never want that to happen to you. Piercing the corporate veil is what happens when somebody is running their own business on their own and they get sued, and the other company or the person suing them, so like Katie, sorry, you're the example here. Let's say you're getting sued and somebody's saying, yeah, it's Katie Selvidge LLC. It's just one person. Is it really a true business? Is she really running it like a business? Or is it really, can we take away that shield of liability protection that I talked about earlier? Because they would try to be suing you for more assets.
Right, because they want to get my personal stuff.
Yes.
They want my house. They want my cows.
They do. They want they want those horses in the backyard. They want it all. And I actually am talking about this from the perspective of somebody who has, at my old firm, I actually prosecuted. I actually sued 4 different companies for this before.
So you know what this is.
Yeah. So
this
I know that
this feels like a Good Wife episode.
it feels a little bit tricky right now. Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that I would be looking at if I were suing you for this, but I'm not going to get into all of those. There are a couple main ones that people need to know. And those are, I'm going to be looking to see if you're commingling your funds. So by commingling your funds, that means that you only have one bank account for your personal and your business money. You always must have separate bank accounts. You always need to have.
And honestly, guys, the points are worth it. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of other reasons why this is a good thing.
And it keeps everything, I mean, not to get on tangent, but it keeps your finances organized. Like, go do it.
Your accountant will make you do it anyway, so just do it now.
Go do it.
So anyways, one of the things they're going to be looking for is commingling funds. Another thing the judge would look for if he's going to decide if Katie, if I'm suing you in this instance, the judge is going to be looking to see if you have an operating agreement, because that operating agreement is going to prove that you did try to at least try to create a legitimate business.
Got it.
It's almost like can withstand that liability protection.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm not using correct verbiage, but it kind of reminds me of intent. Mm-hmm. Like this is my intention for the business, and I'm I'm authentically intending to create something that is truly a business.
It's proof that you tried. And it really is.
But that's incredible how important that is if someone sues you.
Exactly.
And how important it is to have that.
It's the exact same thing as if you have a pond and you don't want people on your property and you don't want people to accidentally fall into your pond, and so you put a sign up that says, or a dog, we'll use that example, and it says, beware of dog. Right. It's kind of like that concept.
But it can make such a difference.
Yes, it makes the whole difference.
And I think that not to pull us off topic, but I think we often think that this will never happen to us. Right. But for me, and not to make this a fear thing, but for me, it's just like I said, I can go about my day and my business with so much more confidence, knowing that even in the worst case scenario, I have a plan.
Exactly. There's another reason why it's important too, and then I'll stop going on and on about LLCs. But this happened last summer with a client of mine. I was working with an accountant to restructure a business, and very, very 3 months, long story short, the accountant had found a tax loophole, and we were restructuring the company for a couple different reasons. And right when we were about to do the restructuring, we pulled the operating agreement, and it was not valid for a few different reasons. And long story short, my clients lost out on that tax cut that they could have received, which was $50,000. Mm-hmm. And so I've written about this on my blog, and I've written about piercing the corporate veil, what I was just talking about, on my blog too. If your head is spinning a little bit from all of this information, you can go read a little bit more about it on the shop's website. But there are legitimate reasons, other than it's great I want you to feel comforted by having your operating agreement, but there are other reasons besides just peace of mind. There are legitimate legal reasons why, and accounting reasons why, I want you to have that operating agreement.
And it's something I didn't realize, and I think a lot of, especially creative business owners, we kind of give ourselves a pat on the back. I filed for business. I'm ready. Yes. And it's like, well, got a few more steps to go. And I'm so grateful that you're talking about this and getting the word out, because it's so important. And like I said, shopcreativelaw.com, I'm going to push it like crazy because it's awesome. But I mean, gosh, I wish I had this when we're not going to talk about my mistakes, but I wish I had this with Cottage Hill, because I mean, it's so easy, fill in the blank, Mad Lib, your thing, and you're set and you're good to go.
I sure hope so. And if it's not, something I will say I have that I don't talk about very often, that I probably should, is I do offer individual review sessions, and I actually do have instructional videos for purchase as well. So if for some reason you need help filling in, usually they're pretty easy to fill in, but if for some reason you had any questions, those are options as well, just to let you know those exist.
I love that. Okay, so I want to move forward. Yeah. We're starting a business, or restarting, or relaunching, or adding a new one. Next thing is usually a website.
It is.
And here we are again. Another mistake I made. I did not realize what was necessary on your website was like a legal thing, not just a nice to have. Yeah. Tell me what most of us are missing and why it's a big no-no.
Well, right now I'm having like flashbacks and PTSD
from
this time last year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the easiest part of this question and then move on to the more advanced part. So you need to have 3 things on your website. The first thing, and let me just say, all of these 3 things need to exist in the footer of your website. The first thing is a copyright symbol. And that's just putting a flag in the ground and saying, I'm saying that I own the content on this website. So,
pause.
Yes.
They just need to put a copyright symbol, or do they need to do anything?
No, just literally put the C in the circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
That's it. Put the year, you can put either the current year or the span of years that you've been in business, and then your business name. Mm-hmm. So again, Paige Hulse, LLC.
So copyright symbol, 2019, or whatever you have, business name.
Yep,
check.
Correct. The second thing that you need to have is a link to your legal documents that must be on your website. Those can be either in one link or they can be in 2 links. That's a very common question I get.
I just do one.
Yeah, I think I do too. I can't even remember right now. Mm-hmm. Actually, I do one on that website.
Yeah.
The 2 documents that you must have are, well, there's one document that if you're a U.S. citizen listening to this, you should have. I won't say must, but if you're my client, then I require it of you. And that is the terms and conditions. The terms and conditions are actually the contract that governs your website. So just like we were just talking about operating agreements governing your LLC, terms and conditions do the same thing for your website.
And I just want to say, once I understood how important this was, you have no idea how, like, it's kind of like a secret power. Having a terms and conditions.
It is.
It's like, you know, guys, when you buy iTunes updates and you click the box and you don't realize, like, what you're saying yes to, it's kind of what it's like.
Or like when you post anything on Facebook and you don't realize you've agreed to the terms that they actually own all the photos you ever put on Facebook ever in your life. Yeah, kind of like that.
So it's powerful, but with power comes great responsibility. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I will try not to get in the weeds too much about this. Because this can get confusing, but it's important. So if somebody ever... Of course, this would never happen in the creative world, but if for some reason somebody decided to be a copycat in the creative industry.
Don't do it.
And they copied something from your website, you would need to go after them if it were something bad. If you do not have a terms and conditions, the only thing that you would be able to go after them for, let's say that they stole photos from your website. Mm-hmm. You could go after them under, you'd have to have a cause of action if you're getting into court. Again, I know I'm getting kind of in the weeds, but it's important. Mm-hmm. You'd have to have a cause of action. If I'm your lawyer, I'm going to look and see if you have a terms and conditions. If you don't, I'm going to say, well, the only cause of action that I can literally put on the complaint or the petition is an intellectual property, a breach of, an intellectual property claim. Intellectual property claims are going to take longer, i.e. you're going to have to pay me more hours, and it's going to get really, really, really expensive to litigate. If we back up and if you're smart and have the terms and conditions on your website, I'm going to say, oh, thank goodness. You have the terms and conditions. That means our cause of action is breach of contract based, which probably will never even make it to court. If it does, it's going to be much more cut and dry because, again, we're talking about a document that can be put in front of a judge and the judge will read it.
You so much freaking money.
Yep, and I would, of course, every circumstance is different, but if you have a terms and conditions, it would be really hard for me to come up with an example of why you would even end up in court in the first place because, again, you have things in black and white writing. Again, I'm speaking very, very generally, but so that kind of leads us to what should be in the terms and conditions.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the terms and conditions is basically like, and if you've actually ever clicked and read one, it basically is like, if you are using this website, you agree to these terms and conditions.
Not basically.
No, you do.
Yeah.
For real.
Yeah.
And like, guys, there's no reason why you should. Like, I just think of photographers. And I see them like someone took their photos and put a different watermark or someone published without permission and all this stuff. And I'm like, you could save so much drama, agony, and potentially money if you're pursuing it that way by just having this on your website.
It's not even a shortcut because it's something you should be doing anyways.
Right.
But we'll just call it a shortcut.
go get one.
Yeah, this is so things you can write in. You can get as creative as you want with your terms and conditions, but you can state literally how people that are on your website can use the content on your website. So you can say stuff like, if somebody were to, like, if you're on my website and you lift any of the copy off my site, it'll be $50 a word or something.
Or
you can get kind of creative with it.
$5,000 a day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the first thing that I would want on the copyright symbol. Second thing is going to be your terms and conditions. It's not a federal law that you have that, but I make my clients have it. It's a very, very, very strong should.
There's no reason you shouldn't. There is no earthly reason you should not have a terms and conditions. I get very pumped up and upset with my clients and editors course students who don't have it, because I'm like, you're literally asking to be copied and not be able to do anything about it.
Thank you for phrasing it like that. That's exactly what it is. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. She just saw the look she gave.
Yeah, you can use that.
So anyways, that leads us to number 3, which is where I have nightmares and flashbacks to last year's GDPR debacle. First of all, if you don't know what the GDPR is, go look on the blog and you can read very long blog posts about it, because I'm not going to talk about that today because this will turn into a 4-hour podcast.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, we've all
we've all been there.
That being said, no matter where you are, it's always been a federal law in the U.S., but now I can say no matter where you are in the world, you must, and by must, I mean legally must, you must have a privacy policy on your website. That's going to explain, I won't get into everything that needs to be in that. That information can be found on the blog, but it's going to explain to the user of your website how you collect data, what you do with it, what personal information you collect on them, et cetera, et cetera. What a lot of people get wrong, because a lot of people think they can just go find whatever document on the internet and it'll work.
And copy and paste,
Yeah. What a lot of people don't get wrong, and I don't know if this even helps or hurts my business by even telling people this, so it's an FTC requirement, first of all. Second of all, one of the things that I can spot when somebody has not had a lawyer help them draft a privacy policy, because it'll be missing certain language. One of those being that the state of California actually has its own laws about what needs to be included. Yep. And that's usually the first big red flag that I'll see, that somebody doesn't have a legal privacy policy.
And it's so funny, because upon working with you, I started looking at all the stuff, and I was like, I'm not in California.
Yeah,
exactly. I need to delete this as an error.
Exactly. And so, and that's kind of leads us into, again, I'm not going to talk about the GDPR, but if you have a website, and if anybody, the jurisdiction around the GDPR, especially at the time that we're recording this podcast, is still pretty vague. If you have a website and anybody in the European Union has Wi-Fi and uses that Wi-Fi to look at your website, you must have a privacy policy. That's kind of how lawyers from what I've been able to tell, that's how lawyers define the GDPR's jurisdiction. So how do you know if somebody in Germany is looking at your website or not?
Google Analytics.
Yeah, well, okay, so yes.
No, but yeah.
If you have the time to go look at all that, then,
yeah,
we have other questions about
what you're doing with your time.
Yes.
No, yeah.
So that's why privacy policies are important across the board.
And it's legally required.
Yes.
You will get in trouble.
The FTC will,
they'll come find you.
They will, yeah. They will find you.
No, but for real, I did not realize how detrimental or required that was. When I would see those at the bottom of websites before creating my, cottage hill and everything, and you just, these things you don't know. Yeah. And especially being, like I said, being a creative business owner, a lot of us stop at number 1. I filed for business.
Yes. And a lot of people, I know that there's 2 phrases that float around quite frequently with me, or fake it till you make it, and I have opinions about that comment, but a lot of people I've seen people actually write like legal terms at the bottom of their site and not link to anything.
Well, sometimes we forget.
Well, okay, so yes, I'll give you
I think I did that on one of my websites. I forgot to actually create a page. So technically speaking, for those of you who are like, hold on, how do I actually do it?
Yeah.
No matter what hosting platform you have, you just create a separate page with all of this. So you can get these these templates from Paige's shop or from a lawyer, wherever, and you just copy and paste the whole thing into one page, and at the footer you have it linked to that page, and that's all you have to do. It is not that complicated. It nothing fancy. You don't even have to make it pretty or format it because people are probably not going to read it. Although since being educated now, I do start reading.
Yeah, seriously,
because it's interesting to me. But I'm also a Type 5 on Enneagram, so
so you're kind of a nerd.
Kind of a nerd a bit. But okay, so we got this. When it comes to selling stuff,
yes,
we have to have a separate
online
terms and agreement.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to talk
because
about. Yes,
again, when you order, I got a big ASOS bag. Like when you order, you click I agree to sales terms and now you don't think about that.
Yes,
when you're selling your work online, your art, your whatever. Talk to me.
Okay, so people get very confused because then I start using the word terms and conditions, and there are 3 different types of terms and conditions that I'll be talking about.
Okay, so
the first one is just the basic one. Yeah, what we talked about.
So basically, you use my website, don't take my stuff, it's going to cost you.
Exactly. Your terms and conditions of online sales.
Mm-hmm.
This one is hugely important. This one is different legally speaking. One thing people mess up all the time is they'll just put it on a page on their website and hope that somebody clicks through that page. That's not legal. You have to actually have somebody click I accept the terms and conditions of the sale, or whatever however you want to phrase it. Those are going to be so important. Even if you don't think that you care, you actually do care about those if you're selling online goods.
So much.
Yes. And just as one example I'll use from my personal life that happened 2 Christmases ago, I bought myself a huge calendar to put in my office. And I was so excited to have this calendar arrive and et cetera, et cetera. It never showed up. Well, actually, because I'm a lawyer, the first thing I do is look through my terms and conditions of online sale. And I saw that they had a provision in there covering what's called risk of loss and transport. Risk of loss is one of those provisions that you don't know you care about, but you do. And that means, in calligraphers especially, this is important for you. And I say this out of personal experience. Who carries the risk of loss? Who is responsible if something gets lost in transit? The reason why I say that's important for calligraphers is because what if the mailman can't read your calligraphy?
Or what if the box of magazines you sent got a huge hole and they threw it in the mud in the rain?
Yeah. Or something.
Yeah, in Norway, and you got to rescind those suckers.
Yeah. So what happened with me?
Yep.
I feel like that's a real story.
Oh, it's a real story.
Okay. What happened with me?
$50 shipping.
The truck that was carrying the calendar that I purchased, I'm not joking, caught on fire and everything in it burned up.
Was the driver okay?
Yes, he was fine. I don't know any details around it, obviously, but luckily the company I was working with was a small business, another small creative business, and they were wonderful. But that being said, it became a real legal question of who carries the risk of loss.
Right. Basically, who pays for this?
Yeah, do I have to pay to have my very expensive item I've been waiting to buy replaced? Or does the company have to replace it without me having to pay any money again? So that's just one example of one of the provisions that would be in your terms of online sale that you, as a creative but business owner, actually really care about and don't realize you care about.
And not just physical products, because especially when I started editor's course and teaching and selling, I guess you could say intellectual information and stuff, property or whatever, isn't the terms of sale where you can also protect yourself from people just copying and pasting
100%.
and forwarding this information? Because I was very afraid of that.
Yeah.
Starting out and having them have to click that. And if I find out, and it has happened, and it's it's really awkward, but it's also like, well, you asked for it. Do the right thing. And but for those of you who are selling something that isn't tangible or is a download or whatever, this is your saving grace.
Yes, this is so important. And this is in any contract that we talk about, when it comes to creatives, you're creating something.
Right.
And so intellectual property is going to be something that you really need to care about. And anyways, we can talk about intellectual property later. But yeah, that's one of those terms that would be in this terms of online sale of goods or whatever it might be. Is you can't, maybe you did download my video or something like that, but you can't recreate my video.
Or forward it to somebody.
Yes, exactly. Or something.
Or something like that. And guys, I think it's so, something that keeps coming back is, do the right thing. Don't be one of those weirdos. But also, for every problem, and this is something that I learned with working with Paige, I would say 99% of every business problem I had, there was a legal answer. Whether it being a contract, whether it being terms and conditions, whether it being something that could have been prevented by just a little bit of forethought and putting those legal things in place. So for those of you, I don't mean to scare anyone, I don't mean to anything, but being someone who has literally had an experience through each of these things, which is why we're talking about them, I just want to save you the misery that I went through and know, it is actually quite simple to fix or prevent these things.
It really, really is. And that's not...
And you have the power to do that.
Exactly. And that's not just because I have a legal degree and so it's easy for me. These are very, very simple things that people just... if you're starting a business, it's not like you all of a sudden decide to start a business and all of a sudden a lightning bolt hits you and you figure out all the answers.
Exactly. You're too busy. I mean, I was speaking as from creative standpoint, you're too busy working on your creative work.
Yeah, exactly.
Not thinking is someone going to copy and paste my about page?
Exactly.
And put in their name?
Yeah.
Real true story.
That happened to a client of mine last week.
I haven't got a chill. I was like, there's no way.
Yeah, they literally
there's no way you named this magazine after a road in your hometown.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, so the crazy will happen. Protect yourself and vice versa. Do the right thing. Do not think you can get away with forwarding things that are not meant to be or doing anything shady like that. It will not. No, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, people like me have a lot of fun with issues like that.
So there's something that you wanted to talk about that's kind of on the same lines.
Yeah.
Of privacy and doing the right thing. Right. And that's the NDA.
That is true. Let me interrupt you real quick and just say that in the exact same way we were talking about the terms and conditions for online sales, that also applies for terms and conditions of online courses.
Yes.
You have slightly different things to consider, and that's why they're two different documents. But that's all I want to say on the issue of website legality, which is kind of what we were talking about anyways.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if you're selling a tangible item, a course, a download, whatever, you make sure your wording is for that specific thing and not just generic.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, because that'll cover refund policies and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Getting into one of my favorite topics, not really, actually it's my least favorite topic to talk about, but the most prevalent, unfortunately, to talk about is the issue of...
idea stealing.
Yeah, is just literal theft. And the way to prevent that, or at least a way to, if you can't prevent somebody from being a bad person, you can at least give yourself a recourse. You can put that in place ahead of time so that if that bad person does do something bad, you can do something about it. And that can usually be handled with a document called a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA.
Okay, there's so many emotions around NDAs, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest thing is I always get clients who are either overusing them and annoying the heck out of others about them, or people who very incredibly need to be using them that are afraid to offend anyone.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I was in that camp starting Cottage Hill. I did not have NDAs because I just thought I just very Pollyanna went into things, and a lot of things
we create because we love to create,
and we do it with people who love to create. And you know what I mean? Y'all get it. So therefore, there was a lot of things stolen at the beginning of Cottage Hill that I was not capable of doing anything about.
Yeah.
So with that sort of fear and emotion, overdoing it and underdoing it, when do you need an NDA?
Yeah, so there's, again, I'm a lawyer, so I can't give you a specific answer, Katie. But you need an NDA. Let's think about the purpose of an NDA. An NDA is, I use really, really nerdy analogies sometimes, and so here I'm going to throw one out at us.
Let's go.
It's like if you have a snowplow that clears the street before you actually drive down the street when it snows. It literally, an NDA can clear the street before you go create something to make it safer for you. So the purpose of an NDA, I don't know if that was like too nerdy for this podcast, and I apologize. The purpose of an NDA is if you know you want to create something and you have the concept, but you need to bring some people on board to execute it. Like you need to bring a designer on board, or just whatever example you want to use. But you don't want news of this concept that you're creating to get out before you actually create it. An NDA is the legal equivalent of them giving you a pinky promise and saying they won't tell anybody about it until you're ready for them to be, for the product or whatever it is you're creating to be out in public. Does that make sense?
So my question, I think that's pretty straightforward, but my question would be, what's the difference between an NDA and like a non-compete? Like, for example, so here's what I get a lot of questions and stuff about is, let's say I'm starting a magazine called Cottage Hill, and these are my ideas for it, and I have a designer. This did not happen, guys, but I have a designer who's going to design it, and I tell them my idea. They sign an NDA, which promises that they won't share what I'm up to, but then halfway through they're like, man, this is a good idea. I'm going to just do it myself before she comes out with it.
Right.
Is there a way to protect yourself from that? Like, when is it?
Well, if they...
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, is there... Because that's what I get asked the most. When I say, oh, you probably need an NDA, talk to your lawyer. They're like, well, how does that stop someone from literally taking my idea and doing it?
Well, if your NDA is drafted correctly, then it'll say something along the lines of if they produce the item or whatever it is that we're talking about themselves, then that is equivalent to them sharing it and then therefore breaking the NDA and therefore being in breach of contract.
And so when you have an NDA, I'm going to get really specific. This is like what I get asked probably the most. When you have an NDA, how specific can you be?
My NDA, when people download the NDA I have on the in the shop, they're usually really surprised, to be quite honest with you, because it's very long. Okay. And it's very, it's detailed.
Because as you know, copycats tend to, people who have a tendency to copycat tend to have an idea of, well, there's nothing new under the sun, which is true, this whole other conversation. But, it's not called Cottage Hill. It's not, it doesn't have all of these things, but it's basically the same thing with a different name. Right. Again, this did not happen, but just as an analogy, if you're trying to go for something new and you're scared, I think we've all been there. Like, how does that, will that protect?
Yes. And the reason why I intentionally draft, even though it can scare some people off, the reason why I draft my contracts, like my NDAs, to be more detailed rather than erring on the side of being too simplistic is because I'd rather you have more language than you want in there and be able to take out rather than you try to make up the correct language to put in. You can be extremely, extremely specific. Again, I've written NDAs for companies that knew that their concept wouldn't come out for 3 years, and it was going to take like 15 companies with however many employees per company to make the thing happen.
And especially with your having worked in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, guys, if you're unfamiliar, this happens a lot.
Yeah.
Where an idea gets...
People find oil and literally...
and even concepts get stolen quite a bit. And my husband works in that energy industry, and you think the creative world gets copied. Like, they have to deal with that so much, talking about tons of legal work. So like I said, my biggest thing is I'll have a client who has a brilliant new idea and is so afraid to ask for any help. Yeah. Because, and it's happened to me.
Right.
I mean, I've had a very specific ideas stolen from the company and not realizing like that I could do something about it.
Right.
And so,
so there are a
this
couple...
is like I said, this is like the most emotional one.
Yeah, there's a couple things that you hit on that I want to kind of break down a little bit, just because these are my most common, or some of my most common questions as well. The first question I think you asked is, what's the difference between that and a non-compete? We talked about that a little bit. One thing I will say, and there's a reason why if you're listening to this and you are searching right now in the search bar on my shop's website for a non-compete, you're not going to find one. And that's because its non-compete laws vary so much not only state by state, but jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Wow. And
they change like, I won't say yearly, but with
quite a bit.
They're based on a common law system, and they change all the time. And so I don't even offer templates in this realm because they probably won't hold up anyways, and I'm not going to give you a sham legal document. So if you actually need a non-compete, that's a whole different scenario, and that's when you would need to specifically meet with a lawyer in your jurisdiction to draft that up for you. The second thing that I wanted to kind of talk about, which you were just in the analogies that you were giving, is a confidentiality agreement. There's always a lot of confusion between the two, and it's kind of like splitting hairs talking about the difference between the two. I usually recommend that clients use an NDA, and I won't get in. That's like a big. I won't get into that. I can write like a 7-page essay on that if you'd like.
We'll read about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you can read that before
we'll
you
read
get
that
it
article.
But something that I put in all of my, or just about, if not every single contract I have in the shop, is a confidentiality provision, which is something that people have you can take it out if you would like, but I have confidentiality provisions in every single one of my contracts.
Yeah, it's kind of a given.
Exactly. So, for example, which leads me so easily into my third point, which is, when do you need to use an NDA, and when are you one of those people that's overusing them and it gets embarrassing?
Yes.
Because we have probably, if the longer you're in business, the higher the likelihood that you will run into somebody who does that, who, for example, will give an NDA for, like, if they want to have 3 people come out and do like a little mini style shoot or something like that. That's the type of scenario where you're overdoing it big time. That's the type of scenario where you need to, if you're that person who just wants to have like a brand photo shoot done, for example, you don't need an NDA. That's not an original concept. Hire a photographer, make sure in your photography agreement with them that there's a confidentiality provision.
Right.
Read through it.
But you're not disclosing anything new or proprietary to your business.
It's completely different than it's a completely different concept than like when you started Cottage Hill.
Yeah.
That was a brand new magazine, brand new concept for a magazine. Everything about it was brand new. That's the type of scenario where when you got started, I don't know who you collaborated with first, but that's where I would have wanted
Google.com.
How do you do that? Yeah. That's where I would have wanted you to use an NDA.
Yeah.
When I started my law firm, it's shocking, but I was not the first one to start a law firm. I know, kind of crazy. That's when I would not have needed to use an NDA. That's when, I did hire a brand photographer, and we did have a contract, and it did have a confidentiality agreement that said that she couldn't post any photos until I actually announced I was starting my firm.
Yeah.
But does that answer that question a little
does,
bit?
and I think so much of it, if you're in good community, your industry friends will let you know when you're being crazy. But also, I think you explained it so perfectly in that it's a new proprietary concept or idea, not new to you.
Exactly. And not just the longer you're in business, because longevity is not the same thing as maturity. But the more that you mature in business, the easier it will become to discern the difference between the two and when it's needed.
Not to make this negative in any way, but as you have negative experiences or are burned or are copied, and you see in real time, in real life, the instances where you should have had these things or maybe not, or whatever, you'll learn.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing with NDAs, I think like I said, you hit the nail on the head in that if it's a new concept to the world, to the industry, to a market, whatever, it's necessary. But if it's new just only to you, like I'm starting a photography business. Okay.
Fantastic.
I'm starting a photography business for this breed of dog that I take in portraits, at this studio. Like, okay.
Yeah.
NDA.
Yeah, exactly.
Did I do a good job with that?
Good, yeah. Well,
I was going to say horses, but I thought I was too close.
Yeah.
Too close.
Well, then you get me on a whole different other tangent.
Too meta. So. Okay, so let's finish out, because I think where the most emotional and painful place that copying happens is inside the business family. And it's in hires, it's in employees, it's in interns who, you work so hard to help and to teach and to help them mature, who take your ideas and run with it, or vice versa. You work for someone who you're doing all of the work for. You're bringing the new ideas. Who owns what? That is a whole other emotional, painful side of it. It's a two-way street. I hate when people are like, these interns stole my ideas. And I'm like, what? The opposite happens quite more than you think. So protecting both sides of the business-family relationship. What do we need to make sure we go into these relationships positively, honestly, and everyone is taken care of?
Right. Well, that's the beauty of the contract, Katie, is that you...
Guys, have you figured out that's the answer? I'm not even kidding. Like, I can't tell you how many of my life's problems have dissipated because of contracts.
It's
probably the most important episode, y'all. It's probably the most important episode you will ever listen to. And if you've gotten to this point, I need to give you 10 points.
I know. Hopefully this hasn't been too boring, but that truly is the beauty of a contract, is you can clarify all of those things at the outset. The whole purpose of a contract, again, is I will keep saying the word clarity. You're going to define and you're going to manage the expectations of both parties. Okay,
it's like a marriage.
It truly is. I mean, it truly is.
Yeah.
And that's why, so you were able in a contract to define who owns what concepts. Of course, you're going to be able to define payment, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You're going to be able to define who gets to take what with them when they leave, et cetera, et cetera. The main areas that I see creative business owners get into trouble when it comes to hiring, aside, and I'll come back to kind of the issue you were talking about, but are one, they will try to do it cheaply, and they will try to bring on an intern and not pay the intern. And I understand that. Again, the whole reason why I created the shop is because I recognize that starting a business is expensive. And so I understand why people try to do that. But it's, I have a blog post. Again, you can go read the differences and all of that between paid and unpaid interns. But generally speaking, it's illegal to not pay your intern. You must, unless you're giving them exchanging college credits, generally speaking. That's the only exception to that rule. You have to pay your interns. That's an area I see people get into trouble all the time. The second area that I see people get into trouble is having an independent contractor that really flirts really heavily with that line of actually becoming an employee of the business.
And what defines that line?
There are 6 factors. You don't want me to get into all of them right now.
What's most important?
Control.
Okay.
Control over the time, methods, materials, etc.
Got it.
And guess what? That's a paragraph that is included in the contracts I write, because I literally will spell out the person's an independent contractor of the business, not an employee, and that the person hiring whatever. So I'll use an example. I have a client who's a graphic designer, and she got hired by a company to do graphic design. And the company, it was a one-person company. This man thought that when he hired my client, she automatically became his employee because he was had hired her just to do the logo. And obviously, that's not how the world works. Like, one logo does not mean employment. And so he got angry when he discovered that she was actually designing logos for a couple different people at the same time. I'm not making this up. Okay.
I'm speechless.
So that's one of those examples why...
But that's an example of people not understanding the creative world too, though.
It is. It is.
I'm going to give, 1% grace. The rest, what?
You're very graceful.
1%. The rest...
Gracious.
The rest, I don't know about that. That's weird. Okay.
Exactly. So that's one of those...
That's like going to, Target and the lady checking you out and being like, you check other people out?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's that's stupid. And so that's one of those reasons why when people, if you go to my shop and if you purchase a template from my shop, it'll have provisions in there. And you might be a photographer and you might be like, why in the heck would my wedding photography contract need to have a paragraph saying that I'm an independent contractor? That's why.
Because
there's a reason behind every word in the template.
Fred is going to think, how dare he photograph my best friend's wedding?
That's exactly right. And so anyways, I see creative business owners getting into trouble kind of on both sides of the coin with that. So in every contract that you have, always clarify your employment relationship with that individual.
And just to pause, any time you have a contract that you feel is too long, it's probably perfect. Because it's covering all of your bases. And you would be, and I guess a running joke or whatever, but the reason why medical paperwork and stuff is so long is because there's actually situations that have happened where those things have needed to be addressed. So if you purchase one of her contracts or you work with your own attorney to put these together and it's a 27-page client agreement or whatever, it's a good thing.
Thank you for saying that, because that's one of those things where lawyers don't, drafting a 27-page document, again, it's not like I have superpowers because I graduated from law school.
Yeah, you do.
It's still, it's hard work. I'm not going to waste my time or your time by drafting something that's unnecessary, putting something in that's unnecessary. And if you're trying to run your business, if you're trying to run your business from the kind of, it's not a scarcity mindset, that's not the right word, but if you're going to be afraid of using contracts with clients and things like that, then there are other issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
I'll just say this. The clients I have that are able to charge the most
value for their work.
Yes. Are the ones that have the longest contracts.
Yep, because they know. They have experienced enough to know that these things do happen.
Exactly.
And you need to be prepared for them. And again, this is not about intimidation. This is not about fluff. This is not just, adding to things or overwhelming your clients. This is about a mutually beneficial protection of both of you. Like Paige said, you're going in knowing exactly what's happening.
Exactly.
No questions.
And it's about professionalism.
And think about any relationship in your life. That's when the best relationships happen, when you are on the same page.
Yeah. And
you both know what you're going into.
That's exactly right.
It's like marriage.
Yeah.
Law is like a marriage.
Okay.
And she's done with me. Okay.
No.
What else do we need to know about independent contractor agreement? What else do we need to know to make the business family happy?
But no matter who you have, no matter who you're bringing on board, to do any sort of work in your business, you need to have a contract governing that relationship. And that's, I'm going to just kind of leave it vague in general at that. I, just as an example, even myself performing legal work, I have performed legal work for my own grandfather, and I have made him sign a client agreement.
Oh, yeah.
My grandpa.
We're doing business with my in-laws for the ranch, and you bet.
Yeah.
There's going to be clear separation.
Exactly.
All kinds of stuff.
Exactly. Especially, and I'm in the position too, where I'm in a transition period with hiring people, and talk about feeling vulnerable. If you've built something from the ground up and you're bringing somebody in and showing them the inner workings, and I mean, especially running what most of us have, our online businesses, and sharing passwords, and I mean, just very, very, when I say personal things, I mean like really personal things. You have got to just make sure that you cannot prevent somebody from being a bad person or making the wrong decisions or just being a flat out crook. But you can give yourself recourses now. You can set that in motion now, so that you have so that you have a recourse later on down the road.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you don't, you hamstring yourself and you get stuck with just having to lick your wounds and move on from it. And that's a harsh way to say it, but unfortunately, I've seen it happen. And it's another thing too, is the role of a contract is to hopefully keep you out of court. It's to define everything at the outset, like we keep saying. It's to manage expectations. And if somebody steals something from you, which is what a lot of people worry about when it comes to employment relationships, you don't want to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars for me to spend hours trying to fight it for you in court. You want to have a black and white document that literally spells out what's right and what's wrong in this scenario. And
I think it's such good preventative measures, not just for the legal side of things, but if you give a client a very full contract and they freak out on you, it's probably not an ideal client.
Exactly.
If you have a new hire and you give them this super long contract, that's, again, mutually beneficial. You're not, you're not putting them in a hole or whatever, or, belittling their work, and they have resistance toward it, and it's probably not a good hire.
That's exactly right. It's a really easy way to, it's actually a really great way to vet those problem clients. And yeah, I've had some conversations again with some of my more high-end clients that my personal firm works with, about that exact scenario where if a client's fighting you on a really simple area of your contract, then cut and run.
I had a potential client who fought with me the method of payment, and I specifically chose that method of payment because of intellectual property provisions for it.
Yeah.
And she fought me on it, and I was like, if she pushes back one more time, I'm not working with her. But she didn't know about that. It was just convenient for her. But just as an example, I was like, I'm ready. I know what I'm doing. I have the thing that I need. So again, it gives you so much confidence, power, and like we said, it gives you a plan for those things. So just to recap real quick, you file your LLC, you have an operating agreement, you have a separate bank account, you start with client agreements at the very least. When you have a website, you need your privacy policy, you need your copyright stamp, and you need your terms and conditions. You need terms and conditions separate for, you're smiling like a good, I'm being such a good student.
She's not reading notes or anything
No, I'm not. No, but you need the terms and conditions for the different types of things that you sell. NDAs, I think, pretty clear cut as to how to deal with that. If it's new concept, yes. If it's new to you, maybe not. And being clear on independent contractor agreements.
Right.
All of these things you can find at shopcreativelaw.com, which Paige has written these contract templates that you literally fill in the blank and are ready to go. And if you are like me and the law kind of makes you nervous, you also provide educational aspects to it to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Right.
And taking a step further, you offer a review.
That's correct.
You're extra nervous.
That is correct.
Extra.
That is correct. And one thing I will say also is this is not necessarily meant to be a plug, but I do update the contracts as needed. Like, for example, when the GDPR came out last year, then it did change, legally it changed what was needed in privacy policies, for example.
So you'll get that update.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And it's crazy, too. I didn't realize how much laws updated and changed.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like social media. We've had that's a whole other episode we could talk about. But, okay, guys, I hope this was helpful. I know working with Paige has changed my life and my business. And I think these are very simple things to do, guys. This is not complicated. There are ways to keep it simple and you get it done. You don't have to worry about it again. Paige, is there anything else we need to know? Where can we find more about you? How can we learn more?
A couple different things.
Yes.
First, if you are on my newsletter list for the shop, you will have already received this, but you'll have access to a whole resource guide, which has a whole 10-step download of everything we talked about today about and even things we didn't talk about today about how to start a business legally.
Awesome.
It has a whole contract guide, which literally is a bullet point list on every single provision that should be in a contract, which is usually more than, I'm giving away everything. And it also has free language that's on there too that you can plug into your contract. That's all at shopcreativelaw.com. You can opt into the website or into the newsletter there. And then I work with, like I said, I work with entrepreneurs and high-end wedding professionals over at my law firm, which is paigehulse.com. So
Awesome.
Paige Hulse Law.
And what's your Instagram?
It's paige.hulse. That's Hulse.
Awesome. Paige, thanks so much for chatting with us today. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And go check out shopcreativelaw.com.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Creative Well. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button and leave us a review with those 5 stars over on iTunes. We would love to hear how The Creative Well has been helpful in your business and life. For more information and show notes, go to creativewellpodcast.com. If you have a question you'd like for me or one of my co-hosts to answer on the show, you can submit your call-in question to creativewellpodcast.com. We would love to know how we can help you in your creative business journey. Thank you again for joining our conversation. We'll catch you next time, and remember, it's not about doing more and it's not about doing less. It's about doing well.